All right, let's talk about inflation. It's this word we hear constantly, this invisible force that's always nibbling away at our money. But in Brazil, the story of inflation is something else entirely. It's not just numbers on a chart. It's this epic national drama, full of chaos, incredible ingenuity, and a fight that honestly is still going on. So, how did Brazil manage to tame this economic dragon? Let's get into it. So, here's the simplest way to put it. Does it just feel like your money doesn't stretch as far as it did, say, last year? Or even last month? Well, that feeling, that's not in your head. That is the core reality of inflation. And it's something that hits every single one of us, right where it hurts, in the wallet. Okay, and here's a super important distinction we need to make. We're not just talking about the price of one thing, like bananas, going up because of a bad harvest. That's just supply and demand. Real inflation, the kind we're talking about, is a whole different beast. It's when everything, groceries, gas, rent, you name it, starts getting more expensive, all at the same time. It's this continuous, widespread erosion of what your money can actually buy. Now, to really understand where Brazil is today, we have to jump in a time machine. We're going back to a period of just absolute economic madness. An era where the economy had a raging fever, a state of hyperinflation so extreme it's honestly hard for us to even imagine today. Can you just imagine the whiplash? In just a handful of years, Brazilians were slammed with one economic plan after another. The Cruzado Plan, the Bresser Plan, the Verón Plan, then Collor 1 and 2. Each one was launched with this huge fanfare, promising to be the silver bullet. But one by one, they all failed spectacularly, leaving people even more confused and digging the country into an even deeper crisis. Okay, get ready for this number. I want you to really let this sink in. 2,477%. That wasn't over a decade. That was the inflation rate for a single year, 1993. This wasn't just some abstract economic problem. It was a full-blown social catastrophe. People saw their entire life savings just evaporate, gone, vanished into thin air. So what on earth was driving this madness? Well, a key villain was a concept called inertial inflation. And this quote here explains it perfectly. It's like a snake eating its own tail. Basically, prices went up simply because everyone expected them to go up. So wages, rent, contracts, everything was automatically adjusted based on last month's crazy inflation. It created this toxic, self-fulfilling prophecy, a vicious cycle that just seemed absolutely impossible to break. So after all those failures, it was pretty clear that another Band-Aid solution wasn't going to cut it. They needed something totally different. Not just another plan, but a genuine stroke of genius. And that is where the Plano Real comes into the story. This was the masterstroke that finally did what everyone thought was impossible. So what was the secret weapon? The absolute genius here was this thing called the URV. Now, check this out. Instead of another sudden price freeze, they created a stable virtual unit of account. For months, the entire economy started thinking and pricing things in URV, even while the old, worthless currency was still circulating. Then, on July 1st, 1994, they just flipped a switch. The URV officially became the real. And because all the prices were already anchored to the stable unit, the memory of inflation was basically wiped clean overnight. It was an incredible economic sleight of hand. Absolutely brilliant. So, the dragon was finally tamed. But how do you keep it from waking up? That's the next chapter. Let's take a look at the modern tools Brazil uses to keep an eye on that fever, the thermometer and the medicine, to make sure it never comes back. You probably hear these acronyms thrown around all the time, IPCA and IGPM, and it's so important to know the difference. The IPCA, you can think of that as the official thermometer. It measures the cost of living for the average family, and it's the number the central bank is always targeting. Now, the IGPM is different. It's more tied to wholesale prices and the dollar, which is exactly why it was historically used to adjust things like your rent and why it could sometimes cause those really shocking annual price hikes. And what's the main medicine when that thermometer starts to get a little too hot? That would be the Selic rate. Think of it like the thermostat for the whole economy. When the central bank raises the Selic, it makes borrowing more expensive for everyone. That encourages people and businesses to spend a little less, which cools down the economy and takes the pressure off of prices. It's the main tool they use to keep inflation in check. Look, winning the war against hyperinflation was, without a doubt, a historic victory. But here's the thing about price stability. The battle is never really over. The world is constantly changing, and with it, brand new, really complex challenges to inflation are always popping up on the horizon.
Yeah, looking ahead, the very nature of inflation is shifting. Now we've got things like greenflation. The move to a green economy is absolutely essential, but it's also expensive, and that can push prices up. We're also way more vulnerable to external shocks, right? A pandemic or a war halfway around the world can instantly wreck supply chains and make everything more expensive. And then there are domestic issues, like an aging population, which drives up demand for services like healthcare that are naturally more costly. The big takeaway here is that the old playbook for fighting inflation might not be enough anymore.
Understanding these complex forces is the absolute first step to navigating our economic future. And that's exactly what we try to do here, break down these huge topics at the intersection of macroeconomics, AI, and technology. So if you found this useful, make sure you follow Macroeconomic IA to stay ahead of the curve. And hey, just one last thing before we go, a quick reminder that everything we've talked about today is for educational purposes, just to help you understand the economy better. It's all based on public info, and it is definitely not financial advice. As we've seen, economic situations can change in a heartbeat, and what happened in the past is never a guarantee of what's going to happen in the future.